and welcome back to another tier list video. Now, obviously today we're going to be doing myth, but before we get into that, there's a few things I'd like to address. First thing, a lot of comments I've been seeing have been about the minions and how I've been heavily underrating them. I'm going to try to rate them more fairly this time, but I want to explain and justify my opinion. Now, if you don't know, I've been putting the summon minions into F tier, and the reason for that is that in my opinion, you should be able to directly control them. See, the problem is that since you can't directly control them, not only do they have the problem where they just generally don't have good spells, but when you do summon them, they'll take things like traps, they'll just generally be unhelpful a lot of times, especially later on. For example, in Avalon, you of course are going to be using feints by that point. So, if you summon a minion, they're probably going to take the feint. That is highly likely, which is blatantly annoying because they won't do nearly as much damage as you. And also, let me turn down this music because it is a bit too loud. There we go. That's good. So there's that. At a low level, I guess it's more helpful, but against a lot of non-bosses, you're probably not even going to want to summon them because mob fights are generally easy. So I will try to rate this more based on what I think is helpful, but generally I don't think that minions are that useful, and I probably never will. No matter what anyone says to me or tries to justify, at this point, I've been playing Wizard101 since 2010. That's 10 years at this point, almost 11. My opinion's set in stone at this point. I've thought they've been useless since I was 8 years old. That's not going to change. So, the reason why I thought I would justify this right now is because Myth has a ton of minions. I will try to rate them more fairly than I've been rating the other ones, but again, I don't know how well I'm going to be able to do that. So, we're going to get started with Myth. Myth is one of my favorite schools of all time, so I hopefully will enjoy it. Alright, first spell on the list is Athena Battle Sight. That is a solid C tier for me. The problem is that it's just 5 pips, does mediocre damage, and then the minus 35 is pretty good, but the 5 pips just makes it not really that cost effective. Personally, I've always thought 5 pips kind of is the downfall of a lot of lore master spells. If they were 4 pips, they would be a lot better. Next is Basilisk, which does initial damage plus damage over time, and I believe it stuns you for 1 round, which isn't that bad. I'd put that at a solid B tier spell. You're probably not going to be using Basilisk all that much later on, but it could come in handy a few times. So there's that. I need to sneeze, give me a second. Alright, I'm back. I sneezed very violently, actually. Next is Stun. I forget exactly what it is, but it stuns all enemies for 1 round. That could be pretty useful. The reason why I don't put it in A tier, it's probably good for PvP, but the reason why it's in B tier is because in PvE, almost every mob post Celestia has 100% stun block, so you're not going to be able to stun them. That's just my issue with it. I don't think it's that useful in regards to that, but obviously it's not that bad. So B tier is a pretty solid place for it. Next is Blood Pat, which I'm probably going to be sticking with what I've been doing and putting it in C tier, because obviously you do use it for a bit, but Troll kind of outlasts it in regards to usefulness. You're going to be using Blood Bat probably until level 15 or so, but you're going to be using Troll from levels 5 to about 30 as a myth. Now, obviously, if you don't have enchants, you're probably going to be using better spells, but if you do have enchants, which is how you should play, then I feel like Bloodbat in C tier, Troll in B tier kind of makes more sense, but we'll get there. Next is plus 40% to next damage spell for minions. That is pretty good, but not that bad. Or it's okay in regards to a minion spell, so I'll put that at D tier. If you have a minion, it could be useful. Celestial Calendar does a lot of damage. It's one of Myth's most damaging spells, and I definitely would put it at a solid maybe A tier. It's one of my favorite of the Aztecan spells, level 88 spells. I've always found it to be pretty cool, so I think that that is a fair placement for it. Remove one negative ward. This is what? This isn't shields, is it? Because that's pierce. That's... What is a negative? Oh, that's you removing a trap from yourself. That, for me, is kind of E tier. You're probably not going to use it all that much. Unless there's a boss that has a cheat trap, I guess. Or if you don't want to faint on you. I don't know. Something like that. Cyclops, summon a minion of Myth for 1 to 4 pips. This is probably the most versatile of the minion spells. I'm not... No matter what bias I'm trying to overcome here, I'm probably not going to be able to put most minions above D tier because they aren't above D tier. And I'm sorry, if you can try to justify that to me in the comments, let me know. But in my head, I cannot justify over D tier for a minion spell. So I'll put that there. This one's probably the one of the most versatile because you can kind of choose what level you'll summon. So, Sacrifice minion for 2 pips. I am skipping a little bit here. I think that one is an F tier, and I think people can agree with me there, because only 2 pips is really low. It costs 1 pip to use it, and it costs a pip to summon a minion. So unless you use the 0 pip summon a myth minion, you're probably not going to be wanting to use that. Cyclops. I've never really liked tier 3 spells. In my opinion, they're kind of meh, because it makes more sense with monstrous anyway. It makes more sense to use the tier 2 spells or the tier 4 spells than it does to use the tier 3 spells. So that's why it's in C tier for me. Not bad, but not good. Trades all hanging effects. I don't know what card this is, and I'm sorry. Let me pause and look it up and see if I can form an opinion about it. Alright, so I've looked at it and I've formed an opinion of it. I don't think it's that useful. Basically, it trades all hanging effects. It's called Dimension Shift. It trades all hanging effects with the minion, and by all, it means all. Positive, negative charms, positive, negative wards, and damage over time, heal over time. So, in my opinion, it isn't that useful unless maybe you want to blade yourself, and then if your minion's using a good spell, transfer the blades to them. I don't see that being good. I'll put it in E tier. I guess it's situational, but in my opinion, it probably doesn't make sense to use it all that much. Earthquake is obviously a decent spell, at least in regards to probably PvP maybe, or certain PvE fights. It doesn't do the most damage, and it costs 6 pips, which is my issue with it, but the remove charms is obviously a really powerful benefit to it, so I'll put that in solid B tier. If you disagree with that, let me know as well. I imagine there will be people that do. I think this is called Legend Shield or Mythic Shield, something like that. It's basically life and death, which, keeping in line with what I've been doing the rest of them, I'm probably going to put in D tier. Good for PvP, probably not for PvE, especially because a lot of PvE life and death bosses aren't the ones that do the most amount of damage and the most amount of damaging cheats. So, I think that that's a solid place for that. Next is Gobbler. I don't actually know if you can get that spell, where you can get it. I think you can, I just don't remember how. So, 3 pips for 310 damage. It's probably, if you can get it at the same time as Cyclops, it's probably a bit better than Cyclops, but instead I'll put it on the same level. It does, the average damage it will do is probably more. So, we'll put that there. I think that that's fair. The 0 pip summon a minion is probably, it's okay. It's probably what you're going to be using as a low-level myth. You get it, obviously, after enrolling in Ravenwood. Okay, please don't give me Dragon's Fire music. This is way too intense for myth. Aquila, maybe? I feel like Aquila is decent for a myth soundtrack, kinda. Yeah, that seems good to me. Alright, so, as I was saying, it's probably an E tier spell. It's not bad, but it's not the best minion, obviously. Obviously, this one is a little bit better than this one, so I'll put that there. Humongous Frog, for me, is an S tier spell because it's a 4 pip hit all spell. Obviously, those are the best spells in the game. One of the best because you're going to be using them on mob enemies all the time. Obviously, the Dragoon Amulet spell, I believe it's Basilisk that hits all, is going to go in S tier. It's just an upgraded version of this, so, you know, put that there. That's where I'd put it. Keeper of the Flame, I've actually always liked this spell. It's definitely better than Athena. It's 4 pips for 400 damage and plus 25. It's very similar to Brimstone Revenant, so I'll put that there. I believe I also put Brimstone Revenant in B. I feel like that's a fair ranking for it, because you probably won't use it all that much, but you'll use it enough to the point where it will be at least decently useful, you know? King Artorias, which, as I've said, is my favorite spell. Now, I did hint at in the past episodes that there is one King Artorias that I do not like, and that King Artorias is Myths. Now, this is kind of a bias with damage over time, but obviously it's not that bad. You can see it does 50 and then plus 1,000. That makes it one of the best overtimes in the game, I believe, which is, you know, it's a decent thing. Personally, I don't think overtimes are the most useful in the world. I like to hit all at once, which is kind of why I like the single hits better. But I cannot say that this is generally bad, especially if you have a Fire Wizard just quest with that has Detonate in their deck. Obviously, that will make it do a solid amount of damage. I have to put it in A tier just because I've always liked King Artorias. As I've said, it's literally one of my favorite spells in the game. It's cheap, effective, and has an amazing spell animation that doesn't take too long. So, for me, it's an A tier, and I have to put it there. Next, we'll do Convert and Mass Convert, which, as I've done in the past, I'm putting Mass Convert in A, Convert into B. A lot of times when you get to high levels, Converts aren't as necessary because a lot of enemies only resist the school 50%, and nowadays Pierce Jewels are the best thing to run because now the new crit system makes it the best to run. So, obviously my Fire has like 30% Pierce, which means they only resist me 20%, which is still enough to probably warrant a convert, but not enough where I'd use it every time. So, definitely is fair, in my opinion, to put those like that, which is, it probably would go into S and A if I didn't think that Pierce was that good. Medusa, quite a bit of decent damage and stun for 2 rounds. This has to be an A tier. The reason why I don't put it in S tier is exactly the reason why stun all enemies isn't in A tier, because enemies past Celestia block your stuns almost 100% of the time. I think this is a fair ranking for it because I feel like the stun is kind of useless. If it wasn't that case, then obviously it would be an S. It would be a hard S. But it just has that issue where the stun won't really work. So I just can't justify it. So I have to put it there. I believe this is called Tranquilize. Reduced threat. I have never liked those spells. Please argue if you disagree. I just don't think they're that good. 350 health for Minion. I personally don't think that that is too useful. Oh no, wait, that's a minion heal. You can heal a minion for 350. I think it would just make more sense to just summon another one if it's gonna cost 1 pip. So I guess I'll put that there. Sacrifice a minion for 400 health. That's okay. I guess I'll put it in E tier because I'm trying to be more fair, but realistically, I don't think you'd want to summon a minion then sacrifice it for 400. It just doesn't really feel that worth it. Maybe if the minion's almost dead and you have it on hand, sure, but a lot of the times you're not gonna need it probably, so that's why I'll put it in E tier. 3 pips, summon a minion of myth. I'll put that in E tier as well. You can see it's kind of, it doesn't really make sense when you have this one to summon, in my opinion. I don't know if this is better than this one, but I'd imagine that the 3 pips this one is worse than the 4 pips of this one, and with power pips you're probably gonna have 4 pips, so I'll put that there. I think that that's decently fair. Minotaur, my problem with it is the 50 and then the 445. Obviously that removes shields, which definitely makes it more versatile, but the 445 damage, the fact that it will take up feints as well, you need to put 2 feints on for it to be as effective, kind of makes it a little bit less good, which is why I'd put it at B tier. It's a solid spell, but not perfect. Mystic Colossus isn't as good as it used to be at all. They heavy nerfed the damage. It says right here 880, but I'm pretty sure, I'm gonna look it up right now. My mouse disappeared for some reason. Give me a second. Okay, wait, let me pause the video, because why does my mouse disappear? I need to... This is bad. Okay, wait, there we go. I made it reappear. I don't know if you guys saw my Control-Alt-Delete there. Let me pause and look up the effects. Alright, so I looked it up. Now it removes one ward and then does 600 damage, which 600 damage isn't bad, but it's not the best. Now, I have always held a soft spot for Mystic Colossus. The problem is its spell animation is god-awfully long. So, if its spell animation hit all four at the same time, I might be able to warrant an S tier, but instead it's going to go A tier for me, because it's just... I feel like they made a mistake. The amount of time that spell animation takes, because it has the ball, and then it steps forward, right? It, like, does the long walks. That's already some seconds. Then every single enemy, it does that long-ass blast animation, which takes probably about 10 seconds each mob, maybe 7 seconds. It's ridiculously long. It's like Cthulhu back in the old days. So I feel like A is a solid tier for that. Let me know if you disagree. Blade is an obvious S tier. I've been saying that for a while. Blades are fantastic and just generally good, so I'll put that there. Midshield, I'll put at E tier again. I think that's what I've been doing with them. Single shields aren't really... Honestly, it makes more sense to use these shields than it does to use the single shields, so I'll put that there. Spears, I've never liked as well. I feel like the 10% pierce just generally isn't worth it, so... I think that's an F tier for me, which it sucks to do that, but I have to, I feel like. Myth Trap is a solid C tier for me. I've never liked traps as much as I've liked blades. I feel like they're not as they obviously aren't as effective in regards to percentage, and just generally it makes more sense to blade stack than it does to blade and then trap, which you can blade stack as long as you have a good pet. And 2 myth blades is better. 2 myth blades and a feint is way better than 2 myth blades and like a myth trap and a feint. Like, obviously not in regards to damage, but it takes an extra round that you don't need to use. Next is Ninja Pigs. I do like Ninja Pigs. It does a solid amount of damage for 5 pips, like a heavy solid amount of damage. So honestly, this might be the first Lore Master spell that goes, well, the first Lore Master spell I've ranked that's been on here. Obviously, Ship of Fools I put at S tier, but and that's not even a Lore Master spell. This is definitely the first Lore Master spell to go above B tier, I think, which it heavily deserves. Orthrus, obviously the spell animation is the old one, or the spell damage to the old one. Now it does 700 damage to all enemies, which is ridiculously good. That is basically Stormlord, except a little bit better, because it does 10 more damage. I mean, so I guess it's about equal. But obviously, that is fantastic. It makes it into one of Myth's best spells. Sorry, I'm trying to articulate here, and I'm not articulating well. It makes it into one of Myth's best spells in general. I think Orthrus is like heavy one of Myth's best spells nowadays. But I wish the spell animation was a little bit shorter. Maybe, I really wish that King's Isle would retroactively go in and change all hit-all spells to hit all 4 enemies at the same time. I feel like that would be incredibly useful for a lot of spells. But either way, Myth, Orthrus, solid S tier. Pierce, for me, is obviously not as good as Shatter. It only removes 1 shield, so that makes it D tier for me. It's definitely useful, but actually, you know what, I'll make it C tier. It can be useful, especially against enemies that spam their shield, so I'll put that there. It's solid. Next is, I don't think that's called Time of Legend. Is it? I don't know, but it's the more powerful Myth Bubble, which gives plus 20% Myth Pierce and plus 15% crit. I think every single time I've ranked these in C tier, because I believe that's around where they deserve. The problem is that they cost 4 pips. It could be useful against certain enemies, but in my opinion, it's not as useful, especially with the crit update making the plus 15% kind of useless. So I feel like C tier is around where it deserves. Correct me if I'm wrong. Bartleby, I believe... Okay, so it's 1150 damage and times 2 if it's stunned. So that's actually really good if you have like another myth or even a fire on your team. Or a storm if you pair this with Stormlord. So I'll probably put that at A tier. It does a solid amount of damage. Potentially S tier. I feel like that's one of the best times 2 on the Bartlebys. So definitely a solid A tier for me. Shatter is obviously a fantastic spell. It removes all shields, and it's, you know, you use it on Yevgeny and the graveyard. There's more that you'll probably use it on. You know what, I'm gonna move Pierce up to B actually in retrospect, because it can be very useful for a lot of the cheating bosses that have one. Shatter's gonna go into S tier because Shatter's obviously a fantastic spell, and it can be incredibly useful for almost all circumstances that involve a shield. Minus 70 shield for the next spell minion cast. Probably around an E tier as well. You know what, I'll put it in D tier with this plus 40%. I think it's fair. It's not that good, but it's okay. Push 1 damage over time to... That's shift. I don't really think that it's that useful if I remember correctly. Push shift over time to... Is it to self or is it to someone else? Oh, you know what? It takes 1 damage over time from you and puts it on the enemy, I believe. So that's a D tier. It can obviously be useful in some cases, but not incredibly. Snake Charmer is one of my favorite in regards to animation of the 4-pip with Shadow Pip spell, and you've probably known I've been putting them in an A if you've been watching my videos, because they do decent amount of damage. They do incredible damage. They did incredible damage for a while there. It was what my fire used. Now it kind of makes more sense to use 8-pip spells. It kind of always has made more sense to use 8-pip spells, but if you do get a Shadow Pip, obviously it's useful. And God, are we listening to Chrysalis music? That's disgusting. Got anything else? Let's go to you know, Grizzleheim works. Oh my God, why is that so loud? And why is it playing the Wizard101 theme if it's in Grizzleheim? I don't know. There we go. How's that look? Yeah, that looks fine. All right, so what was I on? I don't remember. I can't tell you. Next on our list is stun a single target for 1 round, 0 pips. Obviously, that's not that bad in low levels, so I'll probably put that at... I'll put that at B tier as well, because you're going to be using that at a low level. The 0 pip cost is pretty good, not bad at all. So I think that deserves the B tier that it gets. Reduce threat on target. Again, I have to put this in F tier. I just don't like these. Talos, summon a minion of myth. Again, I've been putting these in F tier, but from what I've heard, they are the most useful of the minions. So I guess I'm kind of obligated to put it in the D tier if I put this one in the D tier. I don't think I would ever use it, but as a myth who is summoning minions, it's probably one of the better minions to summon. So go for it, Chief. Go for it. No, this is called Time of Legend, I think. This is the myths thing. I'll probably put that at with the lower tier one. I think both of them, in my opinion, are kind of meh, but obviously this one can be useful, so they could both be useful. It's kind of situational, so I'll put that there. Summon minion for 1 to 3 pips. I'll probably just put that at E tier because it's not as good as the 1 to 4 pips, I guess. Troll for me is a B tier. I've kind of said that in the past that the 2-pip spells are one of my favorites because they do a solid amount of damage. So I definitely think that putting that there is fair and decent. Anyways, Dispel Myth, I feel like that's not as useful as the other Dispels, but I'll put it at a solid C tier. It's situational. I feel like Ice, Death, and what's the other one are the most useful. I don't know, but Balance obviously gets all 3, which is pretty cool. So I'll put it at C tier. Now we have another summon minion. I didn't even know that this existed in a spell for minion. It's a 6-pip one. I'll put that into D tier as well. Not bad, I'd imagine, as a minion. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then finally, Baba Yaga, which is 6 pips and a Shadow pip. It does decent damage and summons a minion. I'll put that at B tier. For me, Baba Yaga is not as useful as it could be, but it's there. Now, I'm going to go through the list, and God, that music's quiet. I'm going to go through the list and name any spells that I haven't named and see what they do. Okay, so Tatsu Worm Terror, which is the new, what's it called one? The new Caramel one, is 5 pips. It obviously can be upgraded. It does a semi amount of damage and then a % chance to confuse for 1 turn. Confuse is kind of cool. It's more of a player thing than a PvE thing, in my opinion. So for PvP, I could even put this at a B tier or an A tier. It's not as good as the other caramel spells, in my opinion, which a lot of them I actually would rank at S tier. I feel like they're pretty solid spells. S or A tier. But this one for me is B tier. I feel like Myths is one of the most underwhelming of them all, so meh. Grendel's Amends, I'll probably put that in A tier. Myth having a healing spell is not bad, actually. It costs 5 pips, which is annoying, but it's not that bad. So, you know, that's fine. I've also figured out Gobbler you get from Baba Yaga, so there's that at level 100. Probably not that useful. At level 100, you're probably not going to be using that as much, and I think the only way to get it is Baba Yaga. So you know what? Let me move that down a tier, actually. I'll move that to D tier. E tier, because I feel like at level 100 you're not going to be using it. So there's that. Saga of Heroes is the name of the other thing, and it looks like that is all of the spells. And that is worth it for me. They're worth it. I mean, that's good for me. Let me know if you disagree with any of them. This has been the longest of the tier list myth videos, actually, which is kind of funny. Or the myth is the longest, probably because it has one of the most amount of spells. But next is going to be life, and then death, and then balance. So I hope you enjoy that, and you're excited for that. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, please drop a like, hit the sub button. If you've made it this far, you know, comment MythPog in the comments below. Because I want to know, do people watch my videos all the way to the end? I don't know. Anyways, see you in the next video. Have a fantastic day. Thank you all for watching.